The cold coming off the wet asphalt was not like ordinary cold. It moved through the denim of Eden's jeans the way water moves through cracked stone, slowly, methodically, without mercy. She lay on her back in the alley behind Rosario's diner on West 41st, staring at the underside of a rusted fire escape, and took a careful inventory of what was broken. Left wrist, sprained or fractured, swollen already to the size of a plum, useless. 3 ribs on the right side, definitely cracked, announcing themselves with every attempt at a breath deeper than a whisper. A cut above her left ear where her head had met the brick landing on the way down. The bleeding had slowed. She'd checked with her good hand twice, and both times come away with a rusty smear that was bad but not catastrophic. The diner was closed. The alley was empty. It was 1:54 in the morning, and she had exactly 4 minutes before the men Pierce had sent realized she hadn't gone out the front. Pierce. The name sat somewhere behind her sternum like a piece of glass she'd accidentally swallowed. She made herself move. Slow, deliberate, ribs screaming in protest as she pushed herself upright against the brick wall. When the worst of the pain ebbed to something she could negotiate with, she made a decision. She walked to the alley's mouth, raised her good arm at the first cab she saw, and got in before the driver could register the blood on her temple. "I need to borrow your phone," she said. Her voice was level. She was almost surprised by it. "I'll give you my employee ID number, my law firm's main line. You can call and verify I work there. I just need 2 minutes." The driver, a man in his 60s with a rosary hanging from his mirror, looked at her in the rear view for a long moment. Then he passed his cell through the partition without a word. People in this city had seen enough that a woman with a bloody ear in the back of a cab at 2 in the morning barely registered on the scale of things worth questioning. She did not call the police. She had considered it the way she considered every option in a bad ledger. Completely, honestly, and then set aside when the math didn't work. Calling the police meant giving a statement. A statement meant explaining that she was a forensic accountant who had spent the last 6 weeks quietly mapping the financial structure of a money laundering operation moving through the firm where she worked. It meant explaining that her live-in boyfriend of 3 years had known what she was looking at, had told the people whose money it was, and had been gone from the apartment before their men arrived. Because Pierce hadn't panicked. Pierce had negotiated. The case file was on her laptop, in the apartment, on a hard drive, with a 4-layer encryption and absolutely no cloud backup because Eden Sorrel trusted clouds about as much as she trusted anything that didn't have a paper trail. She had nothing. She had her memory, which was excellent. She had a sprained wrist and cracked ribs and wet socks. And she had a phone number she had memorized 11 years ago, when she was 22 years old and had just come home from her father's first surgery, and a man she had never met before had sat across from her at a kitchen table and placed a plain white card in front of her and said, quietly but with absolute conviction, "When the world stops making sense, call that number. I owed your father a debt I can't repay. This is the closest I can get." She had taken the card. She had memorized the number. She had shredded the card the same afternoon because she understood, in the specific way that the daughter of a man like Raymond Sorrel understood things, that carrying that number on paper was its own kind of danger. She had spent 11 years doing everything she could to make sure she never had a reason to use it. Her thumb moved over the borrowed phone's screen. She dialed. It rang 3 times. On the 4th, the line opened. No greeting, just the quality of someone awake and listening. "Maddox," she said, "it's Eden Sorrel, Ray's daughter." Silence. Not the silence of a man who didn't remember, the silence of a man who was already standing up. "Tell me where you are," he said, "and what's bleeding." The penthouse office of the Aldgate building occupied the entire 43rd floor and looked at 2 in the morning like a room where important and difficult things were decided. Silas Maddox sat behind a wide walnut desk with his jacket off and his shirt sleeves rolled past the ink that ran up both forearms. Not decorative, not chosen for aesthetic reasons, but a map of contracts kept and consequences served, working through a stack of Port Authority reports with the focused patience of a man who had never found a shortcut he trusted. He was 42 years old. He had been running the city's eastern cargo network for 12 of those years. He owned 4 warehouses, 7 shell companies, 2 judges, and the loyalty of 38 men who would follow a specific order from him without asking for context. He had earned all of it through the application of 2 qualities that most men underestimated: patience and the willingness to pay debts exactly as contracted, no more and no less. The phone in the locked desk drawer rang on a frequency that made the room's ambient sound shift. His second, Royce, a lean, quiet man who had been in the adjacent room with a cup of coffee and a surveillance feed, appeared in the doorway in 3 seconds. Royce knew about the drawer. He knew what it meant. Maddox unlocked it, looked at the screen. Unknown caller. Ray Sorrel had died 3 years ago. He had told Maddox 2 weeks before the end, in that direct, unbothered way he'd had. The way of a man who kept other people's secrets clean for 2 decades, and therefore had very few illusions left, that his daughter was stubborn as limestone and twice as hard to move, and that the only thing he was asking, the only thing in 19 years of service, was that, if she ever called the number, Maddox would pick up. He had said yes, he had meant it. He pressed answer. Maddox, it's Eden Sorrel, Ray's daughter. He was on his feet before she finished the sentence. The movement was not dramatic. It was the same way a valve opens, a release of pressure that had been waiting for the right moment. Tell me where you are, he said, and what's bleeding. She was efficient. He appreciated that immediately, the flat, factual delivery of someone who had trained themselves out of panic and into function. West 41st, alley behind Rosario's. In a cab now, 3 ribs, a wrist, a head cut that had slowed, men who would start looking for her in minutes. Stay in the cab, he said. He was already reaching for his jacket. Ask the driver to go to the Meridian parking garage on 38th, level 2. A man named Royce will meet you. Do not get out for anyone else. How will I know it's him? He'll say your father's name. He ended the call. He looked at Royce across the room. Ray Sorrel's daughter is in a cab on 41st. She's hurt. Get her to the compound. Safe, fast, no attention. He pulled on his jacket, and find out who put her in an alley. The compound was not what Eden had expected, which meant she hadn't known what to expect. She'd imagined something sharp-edged and modern, glass and security cameras, and the architecture of intimidation. What she found 20 minutes outside the city was a converted estate that had the settled, iron-boned quality of a place that had been made to last. Stone walls, iron gates, old trees dripping rain onto a gravel drive. Maddox was at the door when Royce brought the car under the portico. He looked at her the way she imagined. He looked at everything, like he was reading a document and cataloguing what it said. He did not ask how she was. He said, "The doctor's already here," and walked her inside. The doctor, Hagen, he introduced himself, with the clipped efficiency of a man who spent a lot of time in situations that required not asking questions, confirmed 2 cracked ribs, a sprained wrist, and a mild concussion. He bound her ribs with compression tape, splintered the wrist, cleaned the cut on her head with antiseptic that stung viciously, and sealed it with surgical glue. He left 3 days' worth of prescription-grade anti-inflammatories, and a mild analgesic in a small brown envelope, and let himself out without being told to. Maddox stood at the window through the whole examination. He didn't look away. He also didn't hover. There was a precise distance he held, like a man who had calibrated the exact radius of useful presence. When Hagen was gone and Eden was sitting on the edge of a low bed in borrowed clothes, someone had left folded sweats and a grey thermal shirt on the chair, tags already removed. Maddox sat down across from her. He rested his forearms on his knees. He waited. She told him about Pierce. She was good at this. 8 years of presenting financial irregularities to skeptical partners had built in her a reflex for clean chronological disclosure. Pierce Alden, civils engineer, 34, 3 years. She had believed he was exactly what he appeared to be, careful, orderly, a man who color-coded his calendar and worried about interest rates. She had been building a normal life with deliberate, methodical effort, the way you balance a ledger, one verified entry at a time. 6 weeks ago, she had found the pattern in a holding company's accounts. Deposits cycling in amounts designed to sit just below reporting thresholds, rotating through 4 corporate identifiers, in a sequence too regular to be coincidental. She had said nothing. She had started building a case file. She had been thorough, because she was always thorough. And Pierce had noticed her working late, had asked what she was looking at, and something in the asking had felt wrong in a way she could not yet articulate. She had not run. That was the thing she could not stop returning to. She had felt the wrongness, and she had stayed anyway, because she was almost done, because the file was almost airtight. "The file is on my laptop in the apartment," she finished. "Encrypted, but if they get someone competent to run a brute force on it, it's a matter of days." Maddox was quiet. He was looking at the middle distance the way she looked at a set of numbers before the pattern resolved, with the patience of someone who knew the answer was already in there, waiting. "Where is Pierce now?" he asked. "I don't know. He wasn't home when they came." The quiet that followed was not the absence of communication. It was, she understood, a form of it. "My people are already looking," he said. He stood. "Take the analgesic. Sleep. We'll talk in the morning." Maddox. He paused at the door. "Why did you answer?" she asked. "It's been 11 years since you gave me that number. You had no obligation." "Your father kept my operation honest for 20 years, he said. "He never asked for a thing. I told him I owed him a debt I couldn't square. He told me exactly what would square it. He looked at the door, rather than at her. I paid my debts." The door closed quietly behind him. From the inside, Eden turned the lock. She lay back in the dark and listened to the rain and tried to identify the specific shape of what she was feeling. It wasn't safety exactly. It was something colder and more honest than that. The recognition that the life she'd been building for 3 years had never been what she thought it was, and that somewhere underneath the ordinary and the careful and the deliberate, this was always the door she was going to end up standing in front of. She slept before she finished the thought. In the morning, the rain had not broken. The light through the window was flat and grey, and the house was quiet in the particular way of a place where people moved carefully by habit rather than by instruction. Eden found her way to the study by following the smell of coffee. Maddox was behind the desk with his sleeves already rolled, a cup at his elbow, a folder open in front of him that he closed when she appeared in the doorway. Royce was standing to the side. He looked at her without expression and then looked at Maddox. "Sit down," Maddox said. She sat. She had slept 5 hours and taken the analgesic, and her ribs had settled from acute to chronic, which was an improvement. She looked at the folder. "You found Pierce," she said. "It wasn't a question." "Newark." Maddox's voice was flat. "He checked in yesterday afternoon, before your apartment." The geometry of it settled into place before he said the next part. She was an accountant. She knew what it meant when the variables had only one arrangement that worked. "He didn't run because he panicked," she said. "No. He left before they came because he knew when they were coming." Maddox looked at her with the expression of a man who respected the ability to read a bad balance sheet without flinching. "Pierce has been on payroll for a man named Ruiz for 2 years, he said. "Ruiz operates a freight brokerage through the port of Newark that your firm holds accounts for. Pierce didn't stumble into the laundering. He helped design the structure. He paused one beat. He reported what you were building 3 days ago. He told Ruiz's people that you had the pattern mapped and the source documents charted, and that you were a material witness who could walk a federal investigator through every transfer. He offered them a resolution." Eden sat with that. The room was very quiet. She and Pierce had argued, twice, about whether to get a dog. She had thought his reluctance was about the commitment. She understood now that a man planning his exit strategy for the following month was disinclined to acquire a dependent. What did he negotiate for himself, she asked. Passage, cash, a cover identity that Ruiz's people had already been building for him for 4 months. 4 months. She had made his coffee every morning for 4 months while he was packaging her removal from the situation. She pressed her palm flat on her knee and breathed through it. In, shallow, out, the ribs held. "I don't want him dead," she said. Maddox looked at her. "I want to be clear about that before you'd tell me how you handle liabilities." She met his eyes. "Pierce is an instrument. Ruiz is the machine. If Pierce disappears, I lose a witness I need. If you hold him somewhere controlled, somewhere he can't signal to Ruiz, then when this is over, he becomes leverage for prosecution." The silence in the room had a different quality now. She recognized it, the silence of a recalculation. "You want to finish the case," Maddox said. "I want to finish what I started." She leaned forward, ignoring the pull. "I have 8 years of forensic accounting experience and the full structure of Ruiz's financial operation already mapped in my head. You have access to the Port Authority records, the manifest logs, and enough reach that Ruiz is worried enough to make a phone call to you rather than simply act." She watched him. "You have reasons to want Ruiz gone. I have the technical means to do it in a way that sticks permanently and doesn't come back on you. That's a complementary arrangement." Maddox studied her for a long moment. She did not look away. Before he could answer, Royce's phone buzzed twice on the side table. Royce picked it up, looked at it, and said, "Ruiz, the clean line." Maddox stood. He walked to the console and picked up the handset, pressed speaker, and set it on the corner of the desk facing her. The look he gave her was brief. "Stay, hear this, understand what you are now part of." And then he said, into the open line, "Maddox." Silas. Warm, unhurried, the voice of a man with the confidence of someone who had not yet received the news that his confidence was misplaced. "I think we have an accounting problem." "You have a problem," Maddox said. "I have a forensic accountant." A short silence. That's a generous way to describe a loose end. "She's not loose. She's under this roof and she's working." Maddox did not look at Eden when he said the next part, but his voice carried the quality of a load-bearing statement. "The kind you do not say unless you are prepared to hold the weight of it. Ruse, every account your operation runs through the port is being audited as of this morning. Everything Pierce told you she had. She has it, and she has better, and she is methodical in a way that will not leave you room to maneuver. Call this a courtesy. Start thinking about what your exit from this situation looks like, because the window for one is closing." The line was quiet for 4 seconds. Then, cooler, "You're going to war over an accountant." "I'm going to war because someone put a woman under my protection in an alley in the garment district," Maddox said. "And the man who arranged it works for you. That's not negotiable. Neither is she." The line clicked dead. The study was silent except for the rain. Eden looked at the handset sitting on the desk corner. She thought about Pierce in his Newark hotel room, checking his prepaid phone, waiting for confirmation that the problem had resolved itself. She thought about 6 weeks of late nights, the pattern she'd traced through 4 shell companies and 16 accounts and 3 years of quarterly filings, the case she had almost finished building, before someone kicked the ladder out from under her. She thought about her father at the kitchen table, tracing a column of figures with one finger, saying, "The money always tells the truth. You just have to ask it the right question." She stood up. "I need a laptop," she said. "Clean, no prior logins, and I need whatever your people pulled off the port manifests this morning." Maddox looked at her for a long moment. She did not move, did not qualify, did not soften it. He looked at Royce. Set her up in the second office. Give her full access to the manifest archive. Royce nodded and stepped out. Maddox came around the desk. He stopped a few feet from her, that same calibrated distance, close enough to be heard, far enough to be chosen. She was aware of how still he went when he was thinking about something he didn't say easily. "Your father said you were the most precise person he'd ever met," he said finally. "He said you could find a false entry in 10,000 lines of code before anyone else knew to look." He was biased. He was accurate. A pause. He also said you never knew when to ask for help. She looked up at him. He was right about that too, she said quietly. Something shifted in Maddox's expression. Not warmth exactly. Something beneath warmth, older. The gates lock at 9, he said. Nothing comes through them without my clearance. While you're inside this compound, no one reaches you. He held her gaze for one more second. When this is over, we'll discuss terms. When this is over, she agreed. She turned and walked down the corridor toward the second office, toward the clean laptop and the manifest archive, and the 8 years of pattern recognition that Ruiz was about to discover had not, in fact, been neutralized. The rain was still coming down hard against the windows, gray and relentless and useful. It kept the world outside opaque, and it gave her something to measure her focus against. She sat down at the desk. She opened the archive. Ruiz's money had been telling a story for 3 years. She had started reading it once, before someone decided she'd gotten too close to the last page. She was still reading, and this time she was going to finish it. If you felt the shift in that last scene, Eden sitting down at that desk, not running, not hiding, but working, then you already know this story is just getting started. Ruiz thinks he bought himself time. Pierce thinks the problem is resolved. Neither of them has met Eden Sorrel with a clean ledger and a reason to be angry. Subscribe to Mafia Heart Stories and hit the notification bell so you're there for part 2, because the moment Eden finds the one account Ruiz thought was invisible is the moment this whole city tilts. Drop a comment below. Do you think Eden can bring Ruiz down through the books alone, or will Maddox have to burn something to the ground before this is over?